Welcome to The Last Empire again, Ancient Mysteries Reveal the Future. In this second of our series, we're going to be looking at the prophetic code. Ancient Mysteries Reveal the Future. You remember in our first program in the series I should say, we noticed that if you want to know the future, you need to have historical accuracy first of all. It's no good believing in myths and legends. And we saw that the ancient biblical records that were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, which contain amazing predictions that deal with not only ancient civilizations, but today and in the near future. These ancient mysteries have a historical accuracy. We saw that from the great archaeologist William F. Albright. Now, in this program, in our series, we need to have a look at, do the biblical prophets have a proven track record of fulfilled predictions? In other words, do they have a batting average of 100%? Or is it like so many psychics, unfortunately, with a batting average we saw of only 16% for the average leading psychic? So what about the biblical prophets? What was their batting average? We're going to see the evidence that they have a proven track record of fulfilled predictions as we move through this program. Let's go first of all again to ancient Egypt. We want to go to the magnificent land of the Nile where we were also in our last program. Now, I want to take you this time, first of all, to look at the papyrus reed prophecy. This prophecy was made about 700 BC. Now, the papyrus reed once grew prolifically along the shores or the banks of the Nile River. You can see it on the tombs and the temple walls. In fact, it was a great symbol of Lower Egypt in ancient times, the papyrus reed, as you can see on this picture here. Now, the Egyptians also made paper from the papyrus reed. This is where we get the word paper from today. It's from this reed that the ancient Egyptians used to make their paper where they wrote their documents on. They also used the papyrus reed to make their boats as well that sailed the Nile River. So a very important product for the ancient Egyptian peoples indeed. Now let's have a look at what the biblical prophets predicted about this. Let's go to the prophet Isaiah. In his 19th chapter, Isaiah the prophet, writing 700 BC, said these words: "The paper reeds by the brooks, by the mouth of the brooks, shall wither, be driven away, and be no more," said the prophet Isaiah. So there's the prediction. Now, you can travel the length of the Nile River in Egypt today, and you will not find the papyrus reed. It hardly grows in Egypt along the Nile today at all. Yet, if you go over to other countries along that also have the Nile flowing through their countries, you will find the papyrus reed growing there, but not in the Nile, along the Nile in Egypt. It seems to have vanished. And you see the boats winding their way down the river, but this reed has gone. Now, some years ago, Thor Heyerdahl, the great explorer, the man who made that Kon-Tiki boat, you may recall, some years ago in the 60s, some of you will remember that. Thor Heyerdahl came to Egypt looking for papyrus to make a papyrus reed boat like the ancient Egyptians made. Notice what Thor Heyerdahl said when he came here to ancient Egypt. He said, "Pharaoh lies in his tomb with reed boats painted on the stone walls, stone in the desert and reeds on the shore of the Nile." Stone and reeds, he said, were nature's gift to the ancient peoples of the Nile. No papyrus, however, grows in Egypt now. Not a single golden-haired papyrus reed bowed its bushy head over the bank to mirror itself in the brown water. Papyrus had died out in Egypt, says Thor Heyerdahl. No one knew why. The gods had taken back one of their oldest gifts as if they had simply pulled it up by the roots. Now, there's the testimony from Thor Heyerdahl, who went looking for this reed, you see. But the Bible prophets predicted it would be no more growing along the Nile River in Egypt. And today, that's pretty much the situation. You do find a little bit if you come to the Great Cairo Museum in Tahrir Square. there in the middle of Cairo. You'll find some out the front. And I guess they've put it there to remind people of this reed that once grew so prolifically along the banks of the Nile River. So there's a prediction that was made 700 BC and so accurately fulfilled. Let's go to another civilization. Let's come to ancient Babylon, which is in Iraq today. Now, there were many predictions made about the old city of Babylon, which was a fabulous city. And don't miss the next program in our series, because I'm going to take you back to Babylon to see amazing predictions that were fulfilled down through the centuries and even on to our own time today. You're going to see that in our next program. But let's have a look at some of these predictions concerning the old city. Jeremiah the prophet wrote these words in chapter 51, verse 37, "Babylon shall become a heap, a dwelling place for jackals, an astonishment and a hissing without an inhabitant." So it's going to be a heap, says Jeremiah, a heap of ruins. And that's exactly what Babylon is today. When you visit Babylon, as people have been doing for centuries, you will notice it's a heap of ruins. In fact, the ancient people of this area have been taking the stones and the rubble from the old city of Babylon and building more modern constructions down through the centuries. The Bible prophets made a prediction which was exactly fulfilled. There was more. "It will never be inhabited," said the prophet. Nor will it be settled from generation to generation. Nor will the Arabian pitch his tent there. Nor will the shepherds make their sheepfolds there. That's Isaiah the prophet, writing about 700 BC. Now you will notice when you visit Babylon down today that the Arabians don't pitch their tents there and so on. They don't live here in this city like they once did in ancient times. Yet these predictions were made at the time when Babylon was like the great New York or the Washington or the Moscow of its time, the great capital of the ancient world, of the Babylonians. And today it is no more. Now, one more prediction from the prophet Jeremiah. "Babylon," he says, "the glory of kingdoms will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, those cities that were destroyed completely. Wild beasts of the desert will lie there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches will dwell there." In other words, the birds will live right here in Babylon. Now, you can visit Babylon today, and you'll notice, as we see here, there's a column there, and at the top of this column, there's a bird's nest. Just as the prophet predicted in this prediction, that's what we find there in Babylon today. You see, Bible prophecies are dependable. They have a proven track record. But let's continue with another great prediction. If you know something about your history of the ancient world, you'll remember Alexander the Great, that great Greek general who led his soldiers across the Mediterranean world around about 320 BC. Now, Alexander the Great was on his way to Egypt. He had just conquered the city of Tyre on the Mediterranean shores, one of the great Phoenician cities. And he was on his way to Egypt. He went by Jerusalem because he was going to destroy Jerusalem. But some of the priests of Israel met him outside the city of Jerusalem to try to get him to change his mind. And this is what they shared with him. An amazing prediction from their biblical prophets. And when Alexander the Great had this prediction shared with him, he decided not to destroy Jerusalem. The priest showed him Daniel chapter 8 at this time. Now, I would remind you that the Dead Sea Scrolls that we saw in our last program contained the book of Daniel as well. In fact, the book of Daniel was a favourite with the people who lived in this area of Qumran that we talked about in our last program. And so we know that this book goes back to the copies go back to at least 100 to 200 BC. Now, why did this prophecy change Alexander the Great's mind? What was it that was in here that he decided not to destroy the city of Jerusalem? Well, in this prophecy, in Daniel chapter 8, we see a great war between a ram and a goat. Now, who does the ram and the goat represent? First of all, we're told very clearly who the ram represents. Now, by the way, the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel is being written while the great Babylonians are in power. The Medo-Persians are not number one superpower, the Babylonians were. Notice what the prophet says here. The ram which you saw having the two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia, he says. Very clearly, he says that that ram represents Medo-Persia. Well, what about the goat? Who does the goat represent? Verse 21, it goes on to say, the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So, 200 years before the Greeks even came to the great power that they became, the prophet predicted that they would be the next power after Medo-Persia. And he talked about the first king. Now everybody knows who the first king of the united Greek Empire was. It was Alexander the Great, of course. So the goat is Greece. Now the prophet continues. He says, the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between his eyes is the first king, meaning Alexander the Great. And that's exactly what we find in history. Now, you can see now why Alexander the Great did not destroy Jerusalem. The priests of Israel, as they met him outside the city of Jerusalem, they said to him, Alexander, our prophets predicted that you would topple the Medes and the Persians. And the first king of Greece, that's you, Alexander. You're the first one. And he rather liked that. It tickled his ego, I guess, a little bit. And so Alexander decided not to destroy Jerusalem based on this prophecy that we find in the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel. Now, the prophecy continues in the 8th chapter. Therefore, the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of the heavens. As for the broken horn, it says, and the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. In other words, when Alexander the Great dies or is killed, Greece will be divided into 4. 4 horns will replace the one, it says. Now, we know from history today that Alexander the Great died in the great city of Babylon. It was still a mighty city in his time, and he planned to make it the capital of his great Macedonian kingdom, united kingdom with Greece and so on. But when he died, his plans of a united Greek Macedonian empire vanished before his eyes, so to speak. They died. And 4 of his generals fought for control of Greece after the death of Alexander the Great. Just as the prophet had predicted, after that horn is broken, in its place 4 will come up. And that's exactly what happened. 301 BC, Greece was divided. And 4 notable horns, the Bible says, Daniel says, 4 notable horns came up toward the 4 winds of the heaven. And then he says, out of one of them, out of one of the 4 winds, in other words, out of one of the points of the compass, came a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land, which is a reference to Israel. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, which of course in the biblical writers was a reference to the Christ. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary or temple was cast down. Now what's happening here? Who does this next horn represent? This horn, it says, that comes out of one of the 4 points of the compass and does all these things. In fact, he concludes this way: how long will be this vision concerning the daily sacrifices that have been taken away, and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host, that means God's people, to be trampled underfoot? How long is God's people going to be trodden down? How long is all this going to go on for? These terrible things. Now let's have a look what this means. We can see it clearly in history. This little horn that comes out of one of the 4 points of the compass, this represents, of course, the next power, the great Roman Empire. That's what this little horn represents. Everybody knows from history that's what happened after the Greeks. You remember the actions of this little horn. Daniel said it went south. That's exactly what the Romans did. They went toward Egypt. You've heard of Mark Antony and Cleopatra and all of that. This is the time that the Romans started to move down into Egypt. They went east towards Mesopotamia, that is. They went into Israel, or what's called the glorious land. That happened in 63 BC when General Pompey marched his soldiers here into the land of Israel, just as the prophecy predicted. This was greater than Greece, of course, and Greece was no match for the mighty Roman war machine. It stood against the Prince of Princes, or the Christ, Jesus the Christ. How did Rome do that? Well, everybody knows the story of the Passion of the Christ. You saw it on the film. It was the Romans who crucified Jesus the Christ. Not only that, it says they cast down the sanctuary or the temple of the Jewish people. When did the Romans do that? Well, 70 AD. Great General Titus marched his soldiers into the city of Jerusalem after besieging it for some time. They took complete control of the city of Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And then, of course, because they had destroyed the temple, they took away the daily sacrifices. They were no longer able to offer sacrifices, the Jewish people. So amazingly fulfilled. But after the city of Jerusalem was destroyed, of course, and the temple was destroyed, then we notice the final point. Daniel's prophecy said, it trampled on God's people. Did the Romans do that? Well, anyone who travels to the old city of Rome in Italy today knows very clearly the stories that took place here. Here in the great Colosseum that we can see on the screen now. In the Colosseum, many Christians were killed for the games of the ancient Roman peoples. Some of them were put on crosses and tar was poured over them, and they were the light for the games. Others of them were taken down to the Circus Maximus, there just as part of the great Roman complex there of those times, and they were killed there, fed to the lions and so on. And no question, ancient history shows that that's exactly what the Romans did. So you see, this power, ancient Rome, an amazing prophecy. It predicted the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire, the rise of the Greek Empire and the first king. And when he died, it said Greece would be broken up into 4 areas, and it was. And then would come a horn that would do all these things, and that's exactly what the Romans did. You see, the prophecies of the biblical writers are very specific, and we can see very much fulfilled as well. So, in this great war, by the way, between this ram and the goat, we haven't even finished all this. We'll see in another program, because it takes us down to our own day, the rest of this prophecy. Daniel was told, understand, son of man, the vision, this vision he's looking at, refers to the time of the end. You see, this vision that we're looking at, we've only seen part of it. The rest of it is going to take us to the time of the end. And that's why the prophecies of Daniel are so important. They are very specific and clearly have been fulfilled. Well, come with me for another exhibit of the tremendous track record of the predictions of these prophets who wrote this book. Come to Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. We want to visit Herod's great temple, or the sanctuary. Herod was the one, Herod the Great, really embellished the Jewish temple for them. He not only built the Jewish temple back 2,000 years ago, but he did a lot of other building in the Mediterranean region of Palestine. Down at Caesarea, you can see where Herod built a great seaport. And a marvellous place it is. He made an aqueduct that brought water to Caesarea. He also built a number of fortresses that one can visit today around Palestine. You can see them at Masada, up there on the Dead Sea. You can visit the Herodian near Bethlehem. You see, Herod had about 4 fortresses because he made a lot of enemies. In fact, when Herod the Great, before he died, he said, when I die, I want you to kill a lot of people so that someone will be crying at the time of my death. He was a butcher, this man. He was the one who tried to kill the Christ child in the Christmas story, as you recall. This is the Herod who was the one who made the Jewish temple for them of the first century. And it was a magnificent structure. One of the great wonders of the ancient world was Herod's temple there in the city of Jerusalem. Now, I want you to notice, the biblical writers tell us that the followers of Jesus took him on a little bit of a tiki tour of the temple of Herod on one occasion. Showed him this magnificent building with its gold and silver and so on. But I want you to notice what Jesus the Christ said to his followers on that occasion. He said, Jesus said to them, Do you not see all these things, all these buildings? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone will be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Jesus predicted clearly that the temple would be completely demolished. Now this of course caught the surprise of the followers of Jesus. This magnificent structure be destroyed? They wanted to know more about this. So they came back here to the Mount of Olives from where we're taking this photograph. We're sitting on the Mount of Olives overlooking the city of Jerusalem, and they sat up here with him. And they asked him a question. They said to him, "Tell us, when will these things be? When's this going to happen?" Jesus then proceeded to make some amazing predictions about three things, first of all. He predicted the future of the city of Jerusalem. He talked about the future of the temple. And he talked about the future of the Jewish nation. Notice 5 very specific predictions that Jesus the Christ made 2,000 years ago we're talking about. Let's have a look what he predicted, and then let's see what history and archaeology can show us. First of all, he said Jerusalem was to be surrounded by a rampart. That's a wall, and it would be destroyed, he predicted. Let's notice what he said this. In Luke chapter 19, verse 43, "The days will come upon you when your enemies will build a rampart, a wall, in other words, against you, and encircle you and hem you in on every side." So the city was to be completely surrounded. Number 2 prediction Jesus made on this occasion, the temple would be completely destroyed. We just read that a moment ago. Remember what it said? Not one stone here will be left upon another. Now, you think about some of these massive stones that make up the temple complex. You notice this great stone here. Some of these stones were massive things. Some of them, at least one of them was 20 metres long, 2 metres high, 3 metres wide. A massive stone. Now, I'm not suggesting this particular stone was the one. These are just make up the retaining wall. But there were big stones up there, according to the biblical writers, and that's what we find in the old temple complex even today. The Jews, number 3, would fall by the sword, tragically. Jesus said in the 21st chapter of Luke, verse 24, "There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword." Jesus predicted, sadly, that this would take place. Number 4, he said, the Jews would be scattered among the nations of this world. Notice what he predicted here in Luke 21:24 again. "They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners among the nations," scattered around the world. Finally, he said, the Gentiles, which means the non-Jewish people, they will inhabit the city of Jerusalem. Notice his prediction in verse 24 again. "Then Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles." That's the non-Jewish people. "Until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Which is a reference in the biblical writers to the end times. So it's going to be trampled down by non-Jewish people. Now, were these predictions fulfilled? Let's notice what we find when we go to history and archaeology now. First of all, we know from history that 40 years after Jesus mentioned these words, the Romans attacked the city of Jerusalem. It happened like this. The Romans decided to take a temple tax from the Jewish people, and the Jewish people revolted on this occasion and said, "Nothing doing." And they massacred the Roman garrison there in the city of Jerusalem. Well, of course, the Romans weren't going to put up with that, and they sent one of their soldiers, Cestius Gallus, to put down the revolt. He surrounded the city of Jerusalem at this time, and mysteriously he withdrew when he really had the Jews on the ropes at this time. Now, Jesus had made a prediction and a warning to his followers. He had said to them, he said, "When you see Jerusalem surrounded by the armies," then he said, "escape." And when the Roman armies under Cestius Gallus withdrew, these Christian Jews recognized this was the time to run for their life, and they escaped, and that was the last opportunity they had. Well, Vespasian took over the Roman attack on the Jewish people, or tried to bring the revolt under control, and he attacked city after city after city, but he let the Jewish people escape from the cities or towns and villages, but always only in one direction, Jerusalem. And after a while, Vespasian had all the Jewish people holed up in the one city, Jerusalem. And about that time, when he had everybody holed up in Jerusalem, he was made the emperor of Rome, and so his son Titus took his place in charge of the Roman forces. And Titus then besieged the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD. What did he do? He tried to starve the Jewish people in Jerusalem so that people couldn't get in with food and people couldn't get out to get food. How did he do this? Well, General Titus, built a 5-mile earthen rampart or wall right around the city of Jerusalem to stop people getting in and out, just as Jesus had predicted 40 years before. So this is exactly what Titus did on that occasion. Now, tragically, over 1 million Jews perished in the siege by the Romans. You read the accounts of Josephus, the Jewish historian who turned and joined the Roman side. He makes an account of this, and it was tragic to see the fighting was so heavy there in the city of Jerusalem. There were mounds of bodies, and the Roman soldiers walked all over the top of them to keep killing more people. It was tragic. They put people on crosses who were trying to escape and so on. 1 million perished. And tragically, the Jews have suffered terribly down through the centuries, as you and I well know, with things like the pogroms in Russia and the Nazi Holocaust. It was a tragic time indeed for these people. Well, the Jews' last stand in Jerusalem was in the temple. You see, this was the great symbol of Jewish nationalism, their temple. Now you can see on this picture we have on the screen right now that in the back in the right-hand corner there's a great fortress. This is known as the Fortress of Antonia. You see, the Romans, of course, ruled Palestine from Caesarea, that great city of Herod the Great. But they would come up to Jerusalem at times when the Jews had great festivals and so on. And so here they would encamp, or they would live in this great fortress of Antonia to keep an eye on what was taking place among the Jews, because Israel was where was a thorn in the flesh to the Romans. Many revolts took place by the Jews against the Romans, and so the Romans kept a strong watch on these people during their time. So the last stand was taken right inside the temple. The Jewish soldiers fought there. The Romans eventually took the Antonia fortress, and then they moved into the temple to drive the Jews out of there. Now, at this time, Titus had said to his soldiers, don't destroy the temple. It's one of the most magnificent buildings in the world. Don't destroy it. But in the fighting that took place, the hand-to-hand combat and so on, one of the Roman soldiers threw a firebrand into the temple, and the whole thing went up in smoke. Now, there was a lot of gold and silver in that temple, and it melted, and it ran down between the cracks of those great rocks that made the temple structure. And when the fires had gone out and the fighting was finished, the Roman soldiers, in an endeavour to get that gold, they completely tore each stone off the other to get at the gold that ran down between those great rocks. And the whole temple was completely demolished by the Roman soldiers. Not one stone left standing upon another. In fact, in this picture you can see some of those massive stones have been thrown to the ground by the Romans during that great fight. We're looking at the base of the Temple Mount. These were once way up on top where the temple was, part of that great structure. Now, if you view the temple, go to the Temple Mount today, all you'll see is it's a very flat area. The only structures that are standing there today generally are the Islamic structures, like the Golden Dome Mosque and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These were built much long after that. Around 700-800 AD these structures were built. But everything else is just flat. The temple was completely demolished, just as Jesus the Christ had predicted. Now, if you go to Rome today and you visit the Roman Forum, you will see the Arch of Titus. If you look up under the Arch of Titus, there you will see the Roman soldiers taking away the 7-branched candlestick from the temple in Jerusalem. Just as Jesus had predicted, the temple would be destroyed. Here they are taking away some of the furniture in the times of the Romans. And today there's no Jewish temple, of course. It's been completely demolished, and there's no temple there today. Now in 135 AD, the Jews who were left revolted yet against the Romans. And Hadrian was the emperor, and he decided, I've had enough. And so he drove the Jewish people away from Palestine in general. Just drove them away and scattered them among the nations of the world. And since those times, the Jews have been scattered around the world. And today there are more Jews living in the great cities of our world, like Moscow and London and New York. 2 million Jewish people alone living in New York City. They are scattered around the world, just as Jesus had predicted. So it has been fulfilled. And today, of course, the non-Jewish people, the Gentiles, in the main, occupy the old city of Jerusalem, just as Jesus had predicted. There is a Christian section, and they're not Jewish people. There's an Armenian section, and they're not Jewish people. There's a Muslim section or Arab section of the great city of old city, and of course they're not Jewish people. In the main, the old city, as the Bible predicted, is trodden down by non-Jewish people. And today, of course, the Palestinian Arabs control the sacred Temple Mount. Those are the ones who control that section of Jerusalem today. And the Bible prophecies of Christ were exactly fulfilled. That's what we're talking about. This book has a proven track record of fulfilled, very specific predictions, as we can see. Now, you can see, because of its historical accuracy, it's not fairy tales as we saw in our last program. And now it has a proven track record of fulfilled predictions. The biblical writers are the tremendous source, a reliable source for knowing the future. And that's what we all want to know. What's going to happen? That we might prepare for what is to happen. Now, the Bible prophets not only predicted things about the past, but things concerning the future. Not just about past civilizations were predictions made, but our day. Let me just share with you 2 or 3 predictions that concern the very times in which we're living here today, right here. Now, there are 800 prophetic verses in this book. Now, 90% of them have already been fulfilled in predictions like we've just seen. And we've just given you a snapshot of some of these predictions. That means only 10% remain to be fulfilled. And it's these 10% that we're going to be looking at more detail as we move through this series. Amazing prophecies, but let me share with you 1 or 2 so you can see very clearly that they deal with our day as well. The followers of Jesus, as they sat on that Mount of Olives overlooking the city of Jerusalem, looking at that city, notice they asked him more than just about what would happen in the times of the Romans. They said, tell us, Matthew 24 verse 3, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? Notice the focus was also on the signs to do with the end of the world. What are some of the indicators that we're nearing the end of the world as we know it? Now, you would think, as you read what Jesus went on to say, that you were looking at the world, the nightly news on television, or reading the newspaper. They read very similar to what we're seeing in the world today. Let's take one example of what Jesus talked about on this occasion. Signs in the social world, the world of people in the times in which we're living. Notice what he said in Matthew 24 verse 12 as he's overlooking the city of Jerusalem. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. In other words, Jesus made a prediction that as we near the end of time, lawlessness would abound. And it would be very difficult to find genuine love in the world. Now you think of some statistics that illustrate that very clearly. I grew up in the city of Perth in West Australia, and we used to sleep out in the backyard at summertime because, as you know, it's so hot in that place at summertime. You wouldn't do that today. Not if you wanted to wake up next morning. You think about these statistics for just a moment. These are the top problems in the schools in the 1940s. Let's have a look at the top problems in the schools at that time. Some of you may remember this, not too many perhaps. Talking in class, chewing gum in the schoolroom, making a noise at school, running in the halls. You can see these are very serious problems, can't you? cutting in line, not wearing your school uniform, and littering. These were the top problems in the schools in the 1940s. What about, let's just fast forward now to the 2000s. What are the top problems today at school? Here they are. Drug use by school kids. Alcohol abuse, and isn't that the case when we come to the schoolie parties at the end of the year all around Australia? Pregnancy among school kids. On top of that, we have one of the greatest tragedies of our time and our nation, suicide among school kids. Some of them have not yet gotten into their teens. It's tragic. Then there's rape among school kids, by school kids, robbery and assault on the school grounds. You would think you were on a different planet in just such a short space of time. And my friends, tonight Jesus got it right. This is a loveless age. One of the worst statistics that we could talk about in this series is this one. Do you know that 1 in 6 men, young men, will be sexually abused before they reach the age of 18, and 1 in 4 girls? Now that's not love in anybody's language. And that's what Jesus said. We would be living in a lawless, loveless situation as we near the end of time. And we're seeing that right here in our own country as well, tragically. Here's another prediction that deals with our own time. The Bible talks about signs in the world of knowledge and travel. An explosion in travel and knowledge as we near the end of time. Now, Daniel the prophet wrote some amazing prophecies, as we've already seen. But one of the prophecies that he mentioned was this one. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, as he closes his book, he's told, Daniel, you shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. And he gives a description of what the time of the end will be like. Now, he had other things in mind, of course, here, but one of the things, no question, that was in mind was this one. In the time of the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. As we near the time of the end, there will be an increase in knowledge and travel. People running to and fro. Now, isn't that the case? I mean, give me a break. I hate catching the plane at Sydney Airport on a Friday because everybody's travelling. You know what I mean. We have the most travelled generation on earth today. You can be having lunch in Perth tomorrow and you can be having breakfast in Paris and then hop over to New York for dinner. That's the world today. Yet for centuries we travelled no faster than the boat, a ship, or no faster than a horse could carry us. But today we are travelling. Think of the knowledge explosion today. We live in an age in which knowledge, you just can't know it all. It's increasing exponentially today. You know, you have more information today on a laptop or an iPad than people had 40 years ago on a great massive computer that may have taken up a whole floor in a building almost. This is the world today, and Daniel was right. In the time of the end, people would be running to and fro and knowledge would be increasing. He had other things in mind as well, and we'll see that as we move through our series. You're going to be amazed at what Daniel was talking about as well in this passage. Here's another one that shows us our day in the light of Bible's prophecies. You think about this one. Signs of disbelief in creation. In other words, Darwinian evolution. Now please don't get me wrong. I'm not arguing for or against or putting creation versus evolution here. I'm not talking about that. I'm just simply saying the Bible predicted 2,000 years ago that there would be disbelief in God as creator. Look what it says here. Peter is writing 2,000 years ago, knowing this first, he says, that scoffers will come in the last days. He's talking about the last days. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God, what does he say? The heavens were of old. In other words, people are going to push aside this idea that God is the creator God by the word of his mouth. Now you think about that statement. For centuries, almost everybody on our planet, of all different cultures, different races, different religious beliefs, believed in some sort of a creator God. Even in the Western world up to 200 years ago, most Western people in Europe and North America believed in a creator God who created things by the word of his mouth. But today, it's a different story. Now again, I'm not talking about creation versus evolution here. I'm just simply saying 2,000 years ago, the Bible predicted that by and large, many people around the world will not believe in a creator God who created by the word of his mouth. Amazing prediction when you stop and think about it. One more as we come towards the close in this second program. Signs of the destruction of the environment. John wrote on the island of Patmos, that lonely little island in the Aegean Sea. Notice what he predicted 2,000 years ago as he's talking about the end times. Revelation 11 verse 18, the centre of the Bible here, of the book of Revelation I should say. The nations were angry, your wrath has come, and the time of the dead to be judged, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. Now think about that for a moment. He says as we come toward the end of time, people would be destroying the planet. Now, human beings have not been in a position to be able to destroy this planet like we at any time in history. You couldn't do it with some bows and arrows. You couldn't do it with a bunch of gunpowder. But today we can do it in many ways, and we are doing it in many ways. You think of the great Gulf oil spill down in Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico just 2 or 3 years ago. You think of the great Pacific garbage patch in the northern Pacific region. All this plastic flotsam and jetsam and plastic residues floating around. Scientists are concerned today. Why? Because the fish eat that and we eat the fish. And this has them concerned. You think about nuclear war. This has scientists and politicians concerned because we have the ability to destroy the planet many times over just from this one way alone. Now, of course, we worry about dirty bombs that terrorists may get hold of. You see, predictions concerning our own day. And we could go on again and again and again with these predictions that reveal that there's a proven track record in these biblical records. Now, before we conclude this in this program, let me talk about the predictions of the year 2000 and 2012 and other predictions that have been made by the psychics and others. Most of them, in general, have been in the area of gloom and doom, right? A lot of it talks about sayonara, we're all going to go up in smoke, so to speak. But I want to tell you, the biblical prophets are different. They offer hope. They offer hope with meaning and purpose in life. Let me take you to an amazing passage in the middle of a prediction by the prophet Jeremiah, who wrote so much about ancient civilizations and whose predictions were fulfilled right to the letter. Again and again and again his predictions were fulfilled. He says, speaking for the God of the Bible, Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." And my friend, that's what the world needs. It needs hope at such a time as this. And while Bible prophecies show us a very real picture, they offer hope with meaning and purpose in life. That's one of the great things. Let me, in closing, share with you my own journey that it might show you that. I was a university student in the city of Perth, in UWA, when I was only about 20 years of age at the time, and I was studying medicine. And for the first time in my life, I began to ask the big questions about life. You know, where have we come from? Where are we going? Is anybody in control of this thing? And when I come to death's door, what's beyond death? The big questions in life that people start to ask when they perhaps reach that sort of an age. And I began to ask those questions. I began to search for the answers. And the first place I started to look, one of the first places, was the discoveries of archaeology. As I studied the discoveries of archaeology, I found what we've shown in our last program, that the biblical writings are historically accurate. They're not myths and legends. They're not fairy tales. They deal with things that have substance. Then I began to examine, not only could I see that there was trustworthy information here, but I then began to examine some of the predictions concerning the ancient civilizations, some of which we've shared here in this very program, in our series. And I noticed that the Bible has a dependable track record of fulfilled predictions. And I began to realize there must be a mind behind this. You cannot predict these things again and again and again and again and keep getting it right time and time again. There must be something behind this thing. But then as I began to read the writings of these prophets, I found that they brought tremendous hope for the future. And it gave me meaning and purpose in life. I found that it brought a peace to my life, and I could see that there was a horizon filled with hope. And that's what these prophecies will do for you and I. You know, in this series we're going to plunge into some of those great prophecies of the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. I mentioned that 10% of these prophecies are yet to be fulfilled or in the process of, and that's what the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation deal with. And we're going to go to some of those amazing prophecies together. And we're going to have a look at and compare them with what ancient history, university history tells us, and what archaeology has discovered. And we're going to see that these great prophecies show us exactly what is taking place today. We're going to visit ancient civilizations in the rest of our series. But let me tell you what's going to happen as we move through this series. You and I are going to understand the meaning of current global events that are taking place around the world. You and I are going to know what the future holds. We're going to know that for sure. On top of that, we're going to be able to face that future with absolute hope and confidence. That's what we're going to discover as well. And finally, we are going to find increased meaning and purpose in life. So as we continue through our series, we're going to take an amazing journey together through this last empire, ancient mysteries reveal the future. Now, in our next program, in our series, I want to take you to Babylon and to Pompeii, that great city in Italy. We're going to visit these amazing places, and we're going to see global warnings of the last empire. We are going to move on past ancient civilization right on down to our own times. And you and I are going to see with pinpoint accuracy what is taking place in the world today. You won't want to miss that second program. But let me just say a few things that may help you. I am the editor of the Archaeological Diggings magazine, one of Australia's top magazines on archaeology and ancient history. Now, and by the way, on this particular edition of Diggings, we have a report of Egypt's oldest boat. It was discovered by a university professor in Macquarie University in Sydney and his team. Now, these magazines take us to ancient civilization, like we're talking about Jerusalem here. And they also look at prophecies and how archaeology has shown that these things indeed need to be taken seriously. So we also have the Diggings magazine in app form as well. And when you get the app, you can just turn the pages, of course, of the app magazine, but you can see lots of other pictures and video clips on our Diggings app as well. And so you will want to get hold of the Diggings app perhaps. We take tours to the Middle East. Just last year we were travelling to Iran. What a beautiful place that is, and what wonderful, friendly people the Iranians are. And we had a wonderful time there. We didn't have lots of, or no police or soldiers running around with automatic weapons like you have in some countries. And this year we'll be visiting Iran again. We'll be visiting some of the great museums in Europe. And we'll also be visiting the Aztec, Inca and Mayan sites in South America. So if you want to know more about our tours, you can contact us as well to get more information about our tours and about our magazine. Of course, we run seminars such as this. If you are interested or you want to know a little more about the Diggings magazine or our tours, you can phone 1-800-240-543 and you'll be able to get some more information. Or you can go to our website, www.diggings.com.au//advertising. All right, in our next program, we're going to be taking you, as we said, to Pompeii and also to Babylon. So we look forward to seeing you in our next program in our series, The Last Empire, Ancient Mysteries Reveal the Future.